stood his ground and got his clock cleaned. And what was interesting is that Robert Hurt, from the other population center of the 5th, parallel, of course, from Charlottesville, Robert from Chatham, Danville, Pennsylvania, really didn't have to say or do much. And he did not say or do much. He smiled a lot. He's got a nice smile. One of the things about Robert is that caution kind of spills from his pockets. And it was in the 5th district, of course, that there was a very competitive, or seemingly competitive, nomination fight on the Republican side, and where we saw the Tea Partiers emerge in some number. It compelled Robert to move a bit further to the right and renounce some of the positions that he has taken in the past, as well as some of the votes, including raising taxes in 2004. I guess the point being that despite what Robert says as now as Congressman-elect and the positions he's taken to accommodate folks within his party, I think it's safe to say that Robert Hurt is sort of overdressed for the revolution. The turnout was higher than expected, and I mentioned this in a visit with some lawyers the other day. One of the great things about elections is that they forced me to eat crow. And heading into the election, the anticipated turnout was about 40%. Now, depending on how one looks at it, it was either 43% or 46%. It was 46% of all voters, 43% of active voters. And I think that says a lot, to some degree, about the results. Though going into these congressional districts, you'll see there was some fairly high turnouts in the 5th, for example, was well north of 50%. But I know the speaker would quarrel with me on this. But the way these lines are drawn and these campaigns and the voters they attract, I think it's safe to say that often the voting strength of narrow bands of the electorate tend to be magnified. And I think to some degree that happened in these congressional races. And that's going to be a really important factor in redistricting at the legislative level, which is going to be a big piece of business for the 2011 General Assembly. As I said, the takeaway on this is not that the Republicans offered a better idea, it's that they just weren't the Democrats. And it's going to, I suspect, create some problems for the Republicans. The expectations are going to be considerably higher. And keeping in mind that this Republican advance takes place just 2 years after the Democrats took over. And there's ample evidence that Virginia is very much now a swing state. Just looking at the past few years, in 2008, the state went Democrat for president for the first time in 44 years, with a 74% turnout. In 2009, Bob McDonnell, a Republican, was elected governor, but in a 43% turnout. And I'd add that one of the challenges that I think the governor is facing now is because his election was one of those early harbingers of pushback to too much change coming out of Washington. That winning the governorship with 59% of the vote, it turns out, I don't know if the governor has fully absorbed this yet, that it wasn't as much an endorsement of him and the policies that he was recommending as it was a measure of distaste and revulsion to what was going on nationally. And I suspect there are any number of measures of this for the governor, most notably his push toward ABC privatization. The governor's problem was in the House of Delegates. Sure, the Senate and the Democrats aren't going to give him anything, but that a freshly elected Republican governor who took office with 59% of the vote couldn't get his own majority caucus together. One, by the way, that has demonstrated over the years great loyalty to a governor of the same party. That says a lot about some of the difficulties that the governor is facing, even with his spectacular win. So I know that the Republicans, maybe they won't recognize this, and it'll make for a better story, that glory really is fleeting. And that in 2 years, if Virginia's job situation, which is comparatively better than that of the nation, nations of 10, we're roughly 7, doesn't improve, maybe the Republicans will get it in the neck. The rising and fading stars to come out of this election. I think it's safe to say that, to some degree, Governor McDonald becomes less of a presence on the national stage, largely because of the significant Republican victories at the gubernatorial level in a number of significant presidential states. Ohio, Pennsylvania. Republican governors who are going to be in a position to help their party's nominee for the presidency and will have a big say in redistricting as well. And so, to some degree, Governor McDonald, despite his big win, along with Governor Christie, becomes a bit of old news. I don't know that Governor Christie in New Jersey necessarily fades quite as quickly as perhaps Governor McDonald can. I think that also has a lot to do with the nature of New Jersey. It's a weird state, but it is a state that is bracketed by 2 of the largest media markets in the country. New York at its north end, Philadelphia at the south. So I think that means that Chris Christie will get a disproportionate amount of attention going forward. A former governor, Tim Kaine, very much a tarnished quantity following the election. Barack Obama's best buddy, handpicked to chair the Democratic National Committee, seemed to do very well on the fundraising side, but of course, part of his job was to prevent the catastrophe that occurred last Tuesday. And so, there's nothing quite like a big defeat to, bring out the bloodlust in your brothers and sisters. What will happen to Tim Kaine? Could he essentially be promoted out of a job into a senior administration post or a cabinet post? Within his own family, there seems to be some speculation that he really would rather return to the groves of academia. He does teach. Perhaps there would be a university presidency in his future. I don't think it's any secret that while he was governor, there were, of course, 2 major university presidencies that were open. He was mentioned for both, but made it clear he had no intention of seeking either because the boards that govern these schools were made up of his nominees. But I don't think that has diminished his appetite for a presidency. Then there is Eric Cantor from the 7th District. He is a former member of the House of Delegates. He is now, of course, the majority leader designate in the House of Representatives. I think it's safe to say that Eric has had a remarkable career. His ascent has been spectacular, but it has also been one in which